As you may or may not know, I am making some Victorian garments for a ball that I'm going to at the end of April, and so far I have made a corset and I've made a patio. As you may or may not know, I've been making some garments for a Victorian ball that I'm going to at the end of April with Claire and Bryony. And so far I've made a corset and I've made a petticoat, and now I have to make a couple of skirts. So you may think, why would I need to make a couple? Well, I need to make a ball gown skirt, but we're also going for breakfast the next day, and I realised I can't turn up in a ball gown skirt. So I'm also making a walking skirt or a day skirt. I'm not really sure which one it is. I'm not being particularly historically accurate, I don't think, because I'm not using the typical wool for this walking skirt that would have been used. I'm going to use some cotton sateen, and that's because, well, pretty much because it's cheaper. It's so much cheaper than buying wool fabric. So I have managed to find a couple of examples of cotton sateen day skirts, but I think that probably they would have been worn by people who were that little bit less fortunate, maybe. I don't know. Certainly not the upper class ladies that were pretending to be at the ball anyway. But regardless, I'm forging ahead anyway, because money and time's getting short, and I frankly don't have another payday between now and then. So yeah, the first skirt is a walking length skirt made out of green cotton sateen and lined in black organdy. And the ball gown skirt is going to be this blue coloured velvet, which actually doesn't show up particularly well, but in some lights it's kind of like a dark midnight blue, and then sometimes when the light hits it, it's almost like a cobalt colour. It's very pretty. And the ball gown skirt's going to have a short train. So how about we go over to the cutting table and I'll talk you through the fabrics and the patterns that I'm using. Okay, so this is the blue velvet that I just held up to the camera, and you can see how it reacts differently when the light hits it. So when I held it up just now, it was kind of like this midnight dark blue navy colour, and when it hits the light it actually does reflect it and picks up quite a few more nice tones. This is not historically accurate fabric. This is polyester velvet. I couldn't justify the money for silk velvet, and I did get, which I haven't got to hand, but I did get a sample of silk velvet from Beckford Silk. And when I compared the two in terms of their handle, and also realised that it's actually only the backing that's silk on the silk velvet, the pile is viscose, I think I just came to the decision that it probably just wasn't worth paying the extra for something I might only wear a handful of times. And frankly, because I'm such a short person, I don't see there being a massively good resale potential for any skirt that I make. They're not going to fit many people. Right, and then for the walking length skirt, I'm using this green cotton sateen, which I bought quite a few meters of because I think I might also try and make a jacket as well to go with the skirt. And I've decided to trim that in this black cotton velvet as well. And both of them will be lined with this, which is cotton organdy. And if you've never come across organdy before, like I hadn't, it feels like a stiff net. But oh God, can you hear that dog barking in the background? It never stops. So it looks like a stiff net, but it's 100% cotton. And it's actually behaves this way because it's put through an acid bath after it's woven, and it does something to the fibres that makes them permanently stiff. So you can actually wash this and it will go back to being this sort of papery, bouncy fabric again, which is obviously just quite great for skirt linings, because especially like 1890s skirt linings, because it's really going to hold the shape. So that's it as far as fabrics go. Pattern wise, I made a mess here. Pattern wise, I'm using this Laughing Moon 1890s 5 gore skirt, and this obviously, as the name implies, has 5 panels, 1 in the front, 2 side panel pieces, and then 2 at the back that are joined with a centre back seam, and then all the fullness is gathered at the back. And I suspect at some point I'll need to make a bustle pad, not a big one, just like a bum pad to hold these pleats up as well. So there we go. Suppose there's nothing left to do but to get on with it. Here you can see me just folding up the pattern piece. This pattern piece has 3 different train length versions in one, so I'm folding it up so that I can retain the longer train versions for later, and I've folded along the lengthen and the shorten lines so that I can shorten it by 2 inches, because I'm short and the pattern is not. Remember this because it will come back to bite me in the backside later. And then because that creates this weird little jag in the outside edge, I have to join that up to the hip notch just with a straight ruler, and that gets rid of any unevenness in the side seam. And then I'm cutting these out with the fabric doubled over so that I get both panels cut out at the same time. Then I lay the pattern pieces out on top of the organdy and use them to cut around. The pattern pieces are then flat lined together with a long running stitch just to keep the 2 pieces together. And then later, when you're constructing the pattern, you use the lining and the main fabric flat lined like this and treat them as one piece. For the waistband, I'm using cotton organdy instead of normal interfacing, and I've cut a strip that's about half the height of the waistband. It's come to my attention I've made a really stupid mistake. So as I was holding those pieces up against me and checking out like the drape and stuff, I realised that the skirt pieces feel really long, and I thought, well, how can that be, because I've shortened the pattern. And when I've come back to the pattern, I've realised that actually the walking skirt length is 42.5 inches and I've taken 2 inches out. But what I've written on the pattern is 38 inches, which is the length that I need. So it's actually 2 inches longer than it should be. I'll show you what I mean. So here you can see walking skirt length 42.5, walking skirt length that I need 38 inches. And for some reason my brain went, right, cool, shorten it by 2 inches. But obviously that makes the length 40.5 inches. So in this blurb somewhere it says not to shorten by chopping anything off the bottom, but to shorten along the lengthen and shorten lines, otherwise your hem facings won't fit. Now this is fine because I actually haven't cut the hem facings out yet, because I wasn't sure if I was going to use such a deep hem facing anyway. So I think what I'll have to do is just trace the hem facing pattern pieces and trace them like 2 inches shorter, and we should be all good. But what a stupid mistake. obviously wasn't feeling my best that night when I cut that out, because originally I cut out a size 12 as well. Foolish. Ugh. All that aside, there was more flat lining to be done. Lots and lots more flat lining to be done. And the organdy interfacing was also tacked onto the waistband, and I attached the plackets, and they get attached down one side, folded back on themselves, right sides together, and then you stitch along the bottom edge. Then you snip the seam allowance away from the bottom edge, clip the corners, and then you can turn them right sides out, tuck the seam allowance in. You have a neat little placket, and then the raw edge, not the raw edge, but the turned edge can be hand stitched down to the lining of the skirt. I marked the darts using that cool chalk pen that I bought for making the corset. And then I sewed the darts and tied the ends off. Now this isn't the way that I'd normally sew darts. Normally I'd sew right down to the edge and then I'd back stitch a little bit within the dart, but because it told me to do it a certain way in the pattern, I decided to be a sheep and just do it the way that they said to do it. And now I'm lining up the pockets on the side panel, and this is where I actually realised that I've flatlined this side panel wrong side out, which is very annoying because in a minute I'll have to unpick it all and redo it. I only realised this when I came to put the pocket pieces together, side panel to back panel, and realised that they wouldn't fit because the pocket was on the wrong side. And then I thought, and realised I had two pieces exactly the same. After getting this pocket attached, I tried out a lot of different pleating patterns on that back panel, many of which I was deeply unhappy with, and this is where I ended up spitting out my dummy and leaving it for the night. So I'm having a bit of a panic. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Last night I was trying to do the pleating in the back panels of the skirt, and just nothing I could do made it look the way I wanted it to look, and also pleated it down to the width that I needed it to be pleated down to, because you have to pleat it down to something ridiculous like 2.5 inches from 14 inches. So the pleats are pretty hefty, and I had like this vision in my head of wanting the pleats to be like one big nice fan sort of pleat in the middle and then little pleats towards the edges. And I got really hot and bothered and cross about it all, and kind of threw it down in disgust. And then I couldn't sleep last night because I was completely panicking about the amount of time that I've got left to get 2 skirts, a ball gown bodice, potentially a shirt waist and a jacket if I've got the time, and figure out how to cover my tattoos and style a wig. And it all just really got to me. I couldn't sleep till about 1 o'clock in the morning. I know it sounds ridiculous, but kind of I can't turn up to this ball without anything to wear. So yeah, just had a bit of a stumble, but I'm okay now. I'm back in the sewing room, or the study, shed, space, whatever you want to call it. I'm back in the study. Andy's making the tea for the kids, so I don't have to do it. And I'm just going to try and plough on and get a good few hours worth of sewing done. Wish me luck. I think I'm pleased with this, and I don't really want to spend too much more time faffing because I have another skirt to make. It doesn't have quite as much volume here as I think it needs. I might need a bigger butt pad, bum pad. Anyway, it's got gathers, well, pleats. It's got pleats. I'm calling it done. So after deciding I was happy with the way that the pleats were hanging at the back of the skirt, I attached the front panel, and then I also attached the waistband. The waistband was cut down on the inside of the skirt using tiny little stitches. And as I mentioned before, I had to remove 2 inches off the length of the skirt, so I just did that by measuring up from the bottom of the skirt by 2 inches and then cutting around both the main fabric and the lining all in one go. And I'd already left the skirt to drop by that point, so I wasn't too worried about getting an uneven hem. Then I cut the facing out of black cotton velvet that was also shortened by 2 inches all the way around the bottom, and I attached that right side of facing to wrong side of skirt so that I could flip it to the outside and have the velvet showing as a nice big wide trim around the bottom. Then I pinked the raw edge of the velvet trim, and I'll catch that down with a whip stitch just all the way around the top edge of it. And I also tacked in some horsehair braid just above the bottom of the hem. And then, at the request of my eldest one, I spent a few happy hours watching Is It Cake on Netflix and hand tacking in horsehair braid and hand tacking down the facing. And then to hide the raw edge along the top, I just added some velvet ribbon and spent another few hours watching Victorian Farm. To save everyone from another blow-by-blow of how I made the second skirt, because essentially it's pretty much the same process, I did make one minor change, and that was instead of cutting out the lining and the main fabric separately, I cut out the lining and then flat-lined it to the fabric panel and then cut around the lining fabric. And this is just because velvet is so slinky. I was worried that if I tried to cut them out separately, they would both end up 2 completely different shapes once they were cut. And just to make sure that I didn't get any weird sagging, I only flatlined the vertical seams, not the top and the bottom. But as I said, to save everyone from a blow-by-blow, since you pretty much got that with the first skirt, I'll just leave you with a little montage of action footage from the making of this skirt. I'm back. I hope you enjoyed that. It was many days of my life spent making those two skirts. But I'm absolutely thrilled with the way that they turned out. I think maybe at some point in the future I might take the waistband off the velvet skirt and reattach it, just because I feel like that maybe could have been done better. But at the end of the day, I was just quite frustrated working with that velvet, and I was ready to call it quits. So I've already kind of half unpicked it and hand sewn it back on. And it should be fine for the ball, really. I mean, mostly it'll be covered up by the bodice, which I've yet to make. I'm not looking forward to it, to be honest. My plan is to make as little of it with velvet as possible and actually just drape the velvet over, rather than have to put any through the machine. But yeah, I think that the green skirt turned out way better than I thought it was going to. It's really nice. My one concern is how easily it creases, and I imagine this is probably why the Victorian people didn't use cotton sateen that often, because it will just crease up. At least something like wool has kind of a springiness to it, and I guess it probably doesn't crease as easily. But anyway, what's done is done. Probably in the future I might revisit and make a wool version, now that I've kind of whetted my appetite for it. But yeah, I have enjoyed making them, velvet nightmare aside, and I will certainly be making some more in the future. So if you enjoyed this video, I would massively appreciate it if you give it a big thumbs up, and if you're new around these parts and you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe. And I will be back in the next video making the Victorian ball gown bodice, which I'm absolutely certain is going to be a big challenge, but one I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, hopefully I will see you again next time.